Unity uses affirmations. And if you never learned another affirmation, if you never learned anything else, simply, I am here. Do you realize what a miracle that is? I mean, I know you know where you came from, quote, you know who your parents were, you knew how that happened. But the fact that you exist, the fact that you're alive, the fact that all of your organs are in perfect order and you are present, there's a major miracle. And you are that miracle. So if you like listening to positive radio, to add to the wonderful list that Julian gave you, there's something called Posi Radio. So if you know what Pandora is or Amazon Music and you can program all that, you can also just listen to New Thought music all day long on Posi Radio. So I thought that's P-O-S-I. It's an app you can download, and then you can listen to that kind of music all day long as you go about your tasks. So that's another option. We have so many options these days. So the task within a task. I know that you all know what a task is. And have you thought about your life as being a task? No, Samuel?
No. No, it's an expression of joy.
Do you have a negative connotation to the word task?
Not particularly, I don't bother.
So a task is simply what you've chosen to do. It could be you got dressed and came here this morning. That was a task. So if you choose to have negative connotations for task, that's your option. But I think a task is a joyous opportunity. And every single one of us in being born signed up for a task called life. Years ago there was a TV program called This Is Your Life. Well, this is your life. And part of your opportunity is to choose how you're going to live your life. What you're going to notice about your life, how you are going to have the experience of joy in living, how you're going to have, let's be perfectly honest here, the sadness of living. So it would be fabulous, and I support all of you who have never had a single thing but joy in your life. I didn't choose that life personally. That's not the one I signed up for. But the opportunity is, how do you find the joy in the life that you have? I would love to promise you that if you become a student of Unity, if you're a student of New Thought, there will never be anything but rainbows, sunshines, and those little pink hearts that fly through the... That's all you're going to have, because now we're on a positive spiritual path. What makes this a positive spiritual path isn't flying little pink hearts. It's the opportunity to see the world differently than many people in our society see the world. Now, it won't come as any shock to you that we all live in the same world. There's not two different worlds as we walk around. And some of us are sort of constitutionally inclined to notice all of the things that are wrong with our world. If that's not you, you know someone who's like that. I know you do. They announce to you every horrible, tragic thing that has happened in the last 150,000 years. But I hope that you also know people who do not live that way. And see, the opportunity that you have is how it is you are going to live your life. There is the woe is me life, and there is the I live in this joyous, wonderful, beautiful world. I am awake. I am alive. I am here. So how can all of us be living in the same world when there's such a divergence of how we see the world that we live in. That becomes the question. Because it's still the same world. In this very moment, someone is dying. In this very moment, someone is being born. In this very moment, someone is ecstatically happy. Someone else is depressed. Someone else is pondering ending their life. This same moment. And we have to live in this world and discern for ourselves which world we choose to live in. We could go to the book of Ecclesiastes. We could go to the folk song. To everything there is a season. To every purpose under heaven. Time to be born, a time to live. When we know that that is part of the same life, part of the same cycle, all of a sudden we live a different life. So the task within the task is a phrase that I found in some writings by Reverend Richard Rohr. Reverend Richard Rohr is a Catholic Franciscan father. Some of you may know who he is. He's written many, many books, but the one that fits with this particular topic is Falling Upwards. And it's how the hard parts of our life are the parts that often absolutely transform our life. Very few of us are experiencing transformation when we are supremely happy. When we have just fallen in love, when we are excited about life, hardly any of us are going, ooh, and how can I sign up for a course on transformation? It's not when people do that. It's not when I did it. I don't know anyone in the Unity Leadership Movement who came into a church, into a study of truth, into a retreat setting, because everything in their life was absolutely, positively perfect. So until we can live with paradox, all of spirituality is a paradox. This is true, and this is true. A lot of us were raised with the concept that it was either good or it was bad. Not so often did we live with the concept, this just is. There's an ancient Chinese story. Some of you may know this story, but it's one of the ways to help remember this. So there was a Chinese farmer in ancient China, and he had a son who was the light of his life. So he's a farmer living on a farm. And all of a sudden, his son, when he's out and about, captures wild horses. We were talking about wild horses this morning. He captures a couple of wild horses and brings them home. Well, now that's a big boon. Now they've got to be broken and all these things, but still to have horses made them elevated. The farmer's neighbors came over. We would say friends. We don't neighbor in that same way. And they said, oh, you are so fortunate. You are so lucky. It is so wonderful that your son brought home horses for you. You are very blessed. You are very fortunate. And the farmer said, it's not good. It's not bad. It just is. Well, as I mentioned, if you have wild horses, they have to be broken. And as his son was breaking the horses, he fell off and broke his leg. Ah, those lovely neighbors came running over to say, oh, it is so sad. It is so awful. Too bad for you that your son broke his leg. The farmer said, it's not bad. It's not good. It just is. At that same time, the emperor sent through soldiers to conscript all the young men in the village to go and serve as soldiers. Well, the farmer's son had a broken leg, so they didn't take him. And the neighbors ran over to say, and what did the farmer say? Yeah, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just is. And so that's how our life progresses. One moment, oh, look how fortunate we are. The next moment, oh, how awful. If we can move to the point of knowing it just is what's happening in this moment, suddenly we live in a different world. Suddenly we are no longer required to be up here one moment and down here the next moment. It's just what happened. I fell in love. I just met the most wonderful person. We're going to get married. Oh, how fortunate. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. Now, those of you who've been married for a while can relate to that. I know you can. Personally, I've been married twice, and I'm not now. So, do you see how we have an opportunity? So the task within the task is to discern, and you each have to do it for yourself. You know, it would be lovely if I came to your home and told you whether you should be happy or sad in any moment and coached you through that experience. Let me help you understand how it's not good, it's not, no. You have to determine that. And it begins by the practice of not attachment. If I were to check with each one of you, I'm pretty clear that you know exactly how your life is supposed to unfold in this moment. You have a list. These are the things I want. These are the things I don't want. I'm going to gaze into my crystal ball, and I'm going to say you're probably going to get those in equal measure. You're going to get the things you really want, and you're going to get the things you really don't want. So what happens? What do you do when you've just gotten a big load? The dump truck came and dumped it all on you. And what they dumped was what you don't want. How do you live with that? We have examples in the Bible. We're coming up on Easter. What did Jesus say in the Garden of Gethsemane? Father, God, somebody, could this cup pass from me? The answer we know pretty well. The answer was no. This is what you signed up for. We die many times before our physical death. And primarily we die when we have an experience that takes us to the pits. And then we have an example from Easter. After you go into the pits, what happens?
You rise.
You rise. We call that resurrection. So on that moment when you're in the pits, on that moment when you're hanging on the cross, back in the corner of your mind, you have an opportunity to remember that this too shall pass. And the question becomes, how are we going to get our gift, our lesson, our opportunity from this awful, terrible, tragic, depressing, grief-filled moment? And I can't tell you in advance what that moment will be for you, but I can promise you that if you work, if you look at it, if you're attentive to it, it will give you a blessing. If we go to the Hebrew Bible, if we go to the Old Testament, we have an example of Jacob wrestling with an angel. He wrestles all night long. And he says to this angel that he's physically fighting, just as we physically fight whatever happens in our life that is depressing, bad, and awful, I'm not going to let you go until you give me the blessing. That's our opportunity with whatever's going on in our life. I'm not going to let this experience go until it gives me the blessing. Now, when something tragic happens, you can wrestle with that for the rest of your life, if you want to. That's an awful hard way to choose. We have a metaphysical number that we use a lot in New Thought and Unity. It's called 40. Now, if you just hear the words 40 and you think of the Bible, what comes to your mind?
40 days and 40 nights.
Okay, 40 days and 40 nights. Now, what happened for 40 days and 40 nights?
Wander in the desert.
Yeah.
It rained.
Wander in the desert, or it rained, or you had a flood, or Jesus was in the wilderness, or Moses was in the desert. 40 years. 40 simply means metaphysically as long as it takes. So if you have to stay in the desert with Moses for 40 years, okay, you can have that path. Do you need it to be 40 minutes? Do you need it to be 40 hours? How long will you have to wrestle with whatever's happening in your life before you can find something, some kernel that is the blessing that you can take from it? And that's the part that nobody can help you with. Now, you make an appointment, you go see Reverend Doris, and we chat for a while, and I might say, have you found your blessing yet? Have you figured out what that is? And you may not have, and I might nudge you a little in a certain direction, but I can tell you after 25 years of nudging, it's when you suddenly get it, when you suddenly see, oh, okay, this is the gift. My daughter just went through one of the ugliest divorces you can imagine. Pretty ugly. She was with him 18 years, married for 16 years. And their marriage really didn't work, but she stayed with it. For better or worse, richer for poorer. I'm married to this guy till he said, I don't love you, I never loved you, and it's your fault. You shouldn't have married me because you knew I wasn't good husband material. And it's all your fault. Because we like to blame other people. So you can imagine that she was pretty distraught and unhappy. They have an 11-year-old daughter, partially why I live in Colorado now, so I can be around for my kids and my granddaughter. And guess what? Bumble works, because she met this guy on Bumble who is every single thing that her former husband wasn't. Now, he's only her boyfriend, so we're in the place where it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. But the potential is there. So she suffered. I want to tell you, she really suffered. I suffered because I had to sit with her as she suffered. But it didn't last forever. So when you're in the pits, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is until the next event happens. Now, the task within a task is part of a bigger picture of all of this information. We sort of spend the first half of our lives, we spend the first half of our lives building a container. That container contains our education, it contains our profession, it contains our house, it contains our net worth, and we work at that. We work really hard. And all of a sudden, somewhere, between, who knows, 35 and 50, somewhere in there you're going, this isn't really enough. I have acquired the house, I have the right car, I have the right clothes, I have the right bank account, and you know what? I still feel really empty inside. Again, that's a pretty universal experience. Now, when it happens on that journey, changes with the individual, but it's a pretty universal experience. All of the ways we thought that if we had or did exactly these things, we would be joyously happy for the rest of our lives, let us down. And then we began a journey. We began a search. And what we have to do is discover the fact that the container itself, including the container of our physical body, isn't enough. It's what goes in the container that creates the power and the wisdom to really appreciate your life exactly as it is right now, with all of the warts and the bumps and the pains and the aches and the suffering. And that's knowing who you really are in every circumstance, knowing that you are 100% safe. You are connected to the divine universe. There's no separation. That's the challenge with traditional religions. Dear God, please help, because it puts God outside of you. And when God's outside of you, we're always struggling to do it right, to be in right relationship with the divine. The truth is, you were born in right relationship. You are divine. Now, there are the times where you don't feel it, you're not connected to it, and you might have a string of expletives that you would attach to anyone who told you that you were divine. You don't understand my life. But it is true. And the emptiness that we feel, that we search for, is the divine connection to our own self. The divine connection to the divinity that's within us. A surgeon opening you up can't find that. But your heart, your consciousness is a big unity word. We use it in a lot of different ways. But your consciousness always is and always has been and always will be connected to that divine energy. It is absolutely impossible for you to be disconnected. When Unity says the prayer for protection, wherever you are, God is, it doesn't mean you have him in your backpack. It doesn't mean he's sitting on your shoulder. It doesn't mean he's leaning over you, although it feels protective at times. It just means it is a part of who you are. And so we get to practice. And the wonderful thing is that God sends us, we choose. It's so hard to change the language that goes with this because we are conditioned as a society. God sends us. No. Doris chooses, Susan chooses, Patty chooses, Samuel chooses the life experience. But that's a hard one because you have to give up being a victim. You don't get to say, it's not my fault. And you also don't get to get out a cat of nine tails and beat yourself up because you chose it. Do you see that's a paradox? It's not required. It's this option on how we see the world. I recently had a conversation with an individual who shall remain nameless, who within the last couple of weeks told me how I was so hard to work with and everything I did was wrong. Now you know how that feels. And see, on a daily basis, we have those kind of interactions. Sometimes we are the giver, sometimes we are the receiver. And particularly when we're the receiver, it hurts for a moment to think that somebody has that kind of an opinion of us. But that's the point where we get to choose. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. We have an opportunity to listen. Is there a grain of truth in what this individual said to us? Gee, you mean I might have to change something about the way I operate in this world? It's possible. So you get to notice, but in choosing how you hear it, you also get to choose how you respond. The first half of life, the egoic part of our life, it's pretty easy to start punching back and to tell this person how they're wrong and how you know that they're wrong and you're right. That's not living in the second half of life. The second half of life, the spiritual half of life, is about saying, I hear what you're saying, and I'm interested in why you have that experience. Could we talk about it? Do you see that distinction, that difference in how we deal with what happens in our life has permutations from the ceiling to the floor? It affects our intimate partner relationships. It affects our family relationships. It affects the relationships we have with the people that we work with. It affects our relationship with what happens in the world. No matter where you are, somebody doesn't like what you like. Someone doesn't see it the way you see it. But if we can actually listen, could you tell me more about how you see the world? All of a sudden you have people who feel heard as opposed to confrontation. The task within the task is moving from the exterior container, which is really important. We've got to have that. We all need to know how to work in this world. We all need all the information we have gleaned, all the things we have learned. And we need to learn how to let it go and just listen. Because whatever is happening, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And as we learn to work through that experience, as we learn to have an experience that includes rather than excludes, we change the world. The Unity vision statement says, what we're here to do, everybody in Unity, is create a world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. Shared spiritual awakening. That means it doesn't have to happen in a Unity church. It doesn't have to happen in a Center for Spiritual Living church, a CSL church. It may happen in the Muslim world. It may happen in the African world. It may happen in the Mormon world. It just means we all need to be awake. And in order for everyone to be awake, we have one opportunity to contribute. It's the one that you're sitting or standing on right here. Each of us gets to contribute to the world. We contribute all of the skills we learned in the first half of life. All of the knowledge, all the wisdom, all of everything we've acquired, financially, materially. But when we mature spiritually, when we move to second tier consciousness, we then get to contribute in a spiritual way in that we're open and receptive to the living spirit of truth that indwells each person. That's one you have to swallow on. Because it means whoever you dislike the most. I don't want to hear it, but you pick one in your mind's eye. The living spirit of truth indwells that individual. They are divinely guided in their own path to live their life. And when we can actually see and feel that, you remember that song we just sang a few minutes ago about seeing God in every face? Nice songs, great. Now, the practice of that song is more challenging for most of us. Because it's really easy to see God in Patty's face. Isn't she beautiful? Yeah, not so much Jim.
You think that's what it is? not good.
But just is. But you know that you do it. And in truth, you know that I do it. You know, I am not someone separate and apart. You know, they haven't built any altars to me recently. But it's work. It's a task because it's not easy. But it does get easier. As you practice anything, you know, you go home with your dumbbells, man, you start out with 1 pound weights in each hand. That becomes really easy. All of a sudden you have 5 pounds. All of a sudden you have 10 pounds. All of a sudden you have 20 pounds. That's what spiritual life is like. You can only absorb and learn what's yours for today. That's all you're supposed to do. This isn't a race. There's not a deadline. Oh God, if you don't get it by 5 o'clock, you're in trouble. No. It's a progressive journey task for the rest of your life. It is. You woke up this morning, you're breathing. I know you're here. I can see your chest rise and fall. So we're all a work in progress. And as it's like, feels better for you that you're a work in progress and you aren't supposed to have attained it, but that means that Jim is a work in progress too. And he's exactly perfect just the way he is. I'm going to have to buy you a drink. No. It's what happens when you sit in the front row, John. No.
That's what happens when you're in the front row.
She can read his name tag. No. So, I hope within the laughter, within the fun, you found a kernel that works for you. A tidbit that gives you something to chew on for the rest of the day, maybe the rest of the week, maybe longer. And in order to wake up in the morning and approach your day, whether it's good or bad, remembering that kernel makes it easier. At least it makes it easier for me, and I'm hoping that it makes it easier for you. Because to walk into any room, to walk into any environment, to turn on your television set and watch what's happening on that, requires the ability to know that it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. So, I invite you to just take a deep breath and we'll move inside. Just taking a deep breath and letting it out. Not only does that bring fresh oxygen to our system, it creates a pause. And in that moment of choosing to take a deep breath and slowly let it out, we have the opportunity to remember, to be aware, and to choose. How are we going to experience what's in front of us? How are we going to experience what life is presenting us with in this moment? Some moments require many deep breaths. Some moments are fabulous the way they are, and they require no deep breaths. But always we can center ourselves in the divine spiritual awareness that we are one with the divine. We cannot get away from it. We can forget. Anything that we have forgotten can be remembered. When we entered this life as beautiful, perfect babies, we were close to Source and we knew. But living this life until today has caused us to forget, has caused us to feel separate, alone, perhaps even lonely. As we reconnect and remember the truth, we have the opportunity to feel supported, to feel at peace. To draw on the courage, the wisdom, the strength, the joy, the love that lives inside of us. We have an opportunity to eliminate, to let go of any negative feelings, to let go of sadness, we don't let go of memories. We never let go of people, but we let go of the sadness and the grief. Claiming and letting go. Giving and receiving. The ebb and the flow of life. We pause together in the stillness, simply to notice where we are in this moment. We notice without judgment. We notice without thinking that where we are is wrong, thinking that we are not enough. that we should have, we let go of that. We simply notice, knowing in this moment, it's what is, and it's not good, and it's not bad in this stillness. In the stillness of each moment, there is peace. There is joy. There is love. And as we quiet the chatter of our minds, we find the center of our own container, the center of our own life. And in that center, we discover that we are enough. We are whole and perfect, despite any messages we have received to the contrary. So we breathe into that truth. We breathe into that awareness. And we allow that truth and that awareness to be our North Star, to guide us forward into the rest of our lives. Choosing to be exactly who we are, and choosing to allow each individual to also be exactly who they are. And for this fabulous journey we call life, we are grateful. And we say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.